It was the $1,700 World Series of Poker circuit main event in Chicago, and it was at 200, 400, and I had 55K due to my fancy play syndrome from a hand that you may have already seen on Table Talk. You check that out if you haven't seen it yet. This hand might be indicative that I was a little bit in the fancy play syndrome mode for this tournament. You know, now there's a sample of 2 fancy play syndromes. Do you ever get in fancy play syndrome for like an extended period of time?
Of course, of course.
I think these are good plays to be. I think these are good plays, but I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure if these are good plays.
Let's find out.
Let's find out what we think about this one. I have 55K at 400 big blind. I'm at a new table, different table than I was with the previous woman from the hand, if you've seen that one. And I have 2 red 10s under the gun. I opened to 900. And the average stack at this point is still like 40 to 42K. I am always vacillating on my tournament sizing and how it should be pre-flop and unopened pots. What do you think about 900 at 400 big blind when everybody's got 200 bigs? Do you think I should be going bigger?
No, not necessarily. I think it's fine. Okay. You also are a guy who's going to open a lot of hands. So if you have good players at your table, they're going to be a little more apt to 3-bet you, which means you're sort of just taxing yourself by going bigger a bunch of the time. Yeah. It's no limit. You have the ability to bet as much as you want on flop, turn, and river anyway. So you can always make up for it if you feel like you need to later. Yeah. So I think 900 is fine.
Yeah, I agree. I get called in the hijack by a guy who covers me, and he's loosey-goosey for sure. The one showdown I saw him have is where he called the flop and the turn with king 10 high on a 9 high board against an overpair, and it wasn't like he had a flush draw or anything. And he showed down the king 10 hoping he was good. He's quite loosey-goosey.
Wow. Okay.
But he has a lot of chips. It's been working out for him.
Yeah.
He calls, the button calls, and the big blind calls. So we're going 4 ways with 10s. With just over 100 blinds. It's landmines are everywhere, right? This is like a dangerous situation.
Yeah, like we don't expect to win the pot that often, right?
No, it's basically like I'm almost set mining, not quite, but almost.
Right.
So the flop is a pretty good one. I didn't hit a set, but it's a pretty good. It's 8-4-3 rainbow, diamonds, clubs, and hearts.
That's
so
great.
It feels like I kind of have to continue here, right?
Absolutely, you must continue. Hope not to get raised, but you must continue. For
sure. The big blind checks, I bet 2K into this pot of like 3,800, or I guess 4K. It's about half pot.
Yeah, it's fine.
The loosey-goosey guy calls. I'm not too concerned about that as far as him having me beat, right? He could, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, but he could have
luckily no straights,
high,
no flushes. Yeah.
King high, overcards, whatever. Yeah.
An 8, a 4, a 3, whatever.
Yep. Great.
The other 2 players fold. So this is exactly what I wanted, basically.
Yep.
The turn is the king of spades, which against most players is not a concern. Against this guy, it's not really a concern either, but he's more likely to have a random king than most players who called me, right?
Sure.
How do you want to proceed here? I was of 2 minds for sure at this point.
I think, okay, well, you're calling him loosey-goosey, but it sounds like he's loosey-goosey in more of a passive way than an aggressive way, based on your very short description of him.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of evidence of him. I mean, I've seen him raise pre-flop. He hasn't just called. I've seen him c-bet. He does bet.
But like if we check, he may have a lot of checkbacks, right? As opposed to but if we bet, he probably has a lot of calls. It sounds like if he calls. So I want to bet. I think we should keep betting here. We don't have to bet a lot. I think we should actually bet small because we want to keep the 8s and the 4s and the 3s. Any one pair, any ace high, we're trying to keep that all in. So I think we should bet small. If we get raised because he has king 8 or something like that, we just fold. Like whatever. It doesn't even cost you that much and you get value. I think a small bet is called for, like a third of the pot, 25% of the pot, something like that. What'd you do?
Yeah, I do think that's the best play. But I ended up checking. I think I autopiloted a little bit into check call mode, just like assigning his loosey-goosiness to also being bluffy, which may not be correct.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I think is probably incorrect. So I think it was a mistake, but my brain was like, I'm in bluff catch mode and I'm just going to go call on like whatever the run out is. Cause this guy's going to, but he's not that guy. So it was a bit of a mistake. So we just
maybe misvalue. Yeah. But,
so I check and he checks back.
Yeah.
The river is the 5 of spades, which does complete some things. 6-7 gets there as a straight. Any sort of 2 pair can get there, but that's always true. So I decided that I was going to check again because I think he has a lot of hands that just totally whiffed, and he might take a stab with those. I think it's possible.
Really? I feel like the time for him to do that was the turn if he was going to do that a lot, right? I feel like you could be right. It just sounds like based on this player profile, we should be trying to get him to do all this crazy hero calling instead of giving him all this rope to bluff, especially when he chose not to bluff on the turn. Like it feels like he could have made a pair for sure that he's just going to check back when he hits the 5. I'm sure he could have made 2 pairs. Sure, he could have made a straight, but okay, we're going to check call anyway, so whatever. We're going to lose a bet then. I think we should be betting because all those hands that he's just checking back, a lot of them are calls based on this player profile.
I agree, and I think you're right. But this is part of the fancy play syndrome. Like I wanted to show him a confusing line to maximize value, and so my thought process was to either bet tiny, try to get the click war response and snap call if he raises, or to check and see how he sizes. And I might do a little something if he sizes small. We'll see.
Okay, that is super fancy instead of just betting like 25% of the pot again, which I think is probably the highest EV play is my guess.
Yeah, I agree.
But okay.
But I check, and he does bet. He bets 2,500, so it's a small bet.
So he did that small. 25 into like 8,000.
Yeah. Okay. So I think he has a lot of 8s in his hand. I don't think this guy necessarily I don't have enough experience with this guy to know for sure, but I think he would bet an 8. I think he might even bet a 5 if he had a 5, just because he's I have a pair, I'm going to bet it. So I wasn't too concerned that he had a king. I think he would have bet a king on the turn. So I decided to raise. I raised to 7K.
Okay.
Super fancy, I know.
Really, really fancy. So he has to have worse than you, bet and call the raise. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it does feel like a hell of a parlay. But go on. It sure
does. It sure does. So he does take a while before folding. He did fold. Yeah. It didn't work. Maybe I got maximum value. I don't know. He might have had nothing and was stabbing the river. I'm not really sure. Maybe. There was a guy on my right who was a pro for sure and jovial guy. And he's like, you had aces, right? I was aces. I was like, it was a little thinner than that. He's like, you had ace king? I was like, it was a little thinner than that.
And he's like, it was a little thinner.
Yeah. He's like, you're a sicko. And I was like, yeah, it was probably too thin. That's what I said to him.
I think it was too thin. That's my initial hit.
I think it was too. But I'm fucking with the dials over here. I'm trying to have.
I mean, that's fine. And there's some extra there's some metagame value to it. If he calls and you turn over 10s and all the pros see that, they're going to be like, what the hell is happening with that dude? Which is kind of cool. It's not worth it, I don't think, losing, the extra 4,500 when the guy calls and has you beat, which he easily could have made 2 pair, for example, or even a king, check back the king and bet small because you look so weak yourself when you check twice. You look like you have ace high type hands. I don't know.
It's all possible. But I trust my reads pretty strongly, and maybe too strongly sometimes. But I was really thinking that the sizing was quite indicative based on the type of guy that this guy was, that he didn't have.
You're probably right. You're probably right. Generally, they're going to go bigger when they have top pair type hands. It just is. Sometimes they don't, and then you also have to get called by your race has to get called by the worst hand for it to be a good play. And if he ended up folding an 8, for example, we'll never know what he had anyway, right? But he ended up folding an 8, then it's sort of pretty clearly not an effective play against him that time, at least. Right. That doesn't mean it's an ineffective play, but generally.
I have no idea what he folded. But in my mind, if we forget the rest of the hand, once he bet the 2,500 on the river, it felt like I had to raise. Like it was a free roll to raise. Like it would be foolish not to once I was there. Like, why not get more money in the pot if I feel like I have the best hand 95% of the time?
As long as he's going to call with a worse hand, at least sometimes it's fine. But if he's literally never going to call with worse, then it's a bad play.
I agree.
Right? There's no value in it then, right? Then you're free rolling yourself. He's free rolling you then. But even though I understand that most of the time you're going to have him beat when he bets that small and with that situation.
Yeah.
So that's the question. I don't know if he folded an 8. I just said he folded an 8. He could have folded 1 pair or no pair. He could have folded ace high there too, and maybe snap calling you with an 8, and then you'd be right. We just can't
gonna
know.
tell myself that he had nothing and that he would have called with an 8. That's what I'm telling myself.
There you go.
And that's how my fancy play syndrome journey continued.
I'm sick and tired of being tired of being sick. In my head 24/7, how I'm supposed to pay the rent. Mr. Practice, I don't play. Friday nights we on the bench, trying to come up with a play. If it don't work, then hit a lick.